Well, the best deer cartridge. A lot of folks say that's a silly statement, a silly argument. You cannot choose the best. It varies, and it varies widely. But boy, I'll tell you what, we outdoor writers work on that one quite often. But are we full of it? Or can there really be the best deer cartridge? Over the years, I've had several, and now I have a new one, and it's not the 6.5. Hey everyone, Ron Spomer here to extol the virtues of a 6.5 millimeter cartridge, what I now consider the best all-around deer and elk hunting cartridge out there. Maybe. Let's see what you think. Hey, before we go on, I do want to thank our patrons for supporting us on Patreon. Really helps, folks. We sincerely appreciate it. And everyone's watching this, would just be wonderful if you could give us a thumbs up if you appreciate the channel. That always helps too. Subscribe if you can. Check us out at Ron Spomer Outdoors podcasts on YouTube as well. Now, what about this perfect so-called balanced all-around deer cartridge? And I'm going to include elk in here too. It's not quite perfect for elk, but by golly, I think it just works all around as a Goldilocks cartridge. And years ago, I wrote a blog on ronspomeroutdoors.com called essentially the best balanced, perfect all around what we're talking about. And I decided it was something most of us have never seen or heard of, the 6.5-284 Norma. This was the 284 Winchester cartridge from 1964 that was necked down to take a 26-inch caliber bullet, not 26-inch, a .26-inch caliber bullet. And it drives it around 2,850 feet per second for a 140-ish grain weight bullet. And it's in a short action, so it's pretty darned efficient. And it's just about the right bullet weight for deer. You know, if you think about classic deer cartridges, 270 Winchester, you're talking about a 130 grain bullet to maybe 150 grain. 30-06 people usually are shooting a 150 grain bullet. 308, same thing. The 257 Roberts 25-06 were real popular deer cartridges, and they're taking about a 120 grain bullet. So we're kind of right in the ballpark with that bullet weight, and also with the velocity. Most general deer cartridges are going somewhere from 2,700 feet per second, upwards of 3,000 to 3,100 feet per second. You go any faster than that, you're getting into the Magnum class, a little more recoil. A lot of folks don't really need all that velocity or appreciate it, especially folks back in the wooded country back east, or even in the west if you're hunting the thick forests. So it just seemed to be a nice, really balanced compromise. But then you have to take into account recoil. Not everybody wants to absorb a lot of recoil. Not that I think 30-06 has a lot of recoil, but boy, some folks do. And hey, it's all an individual deal. If you don't like it and you don't shoot it well, you better get something else. So there's where the balance comes in on all this stuff. And I'd say about 25 years ago, I would have said the 7mm 08 is just the perfect deer cartridge. Nicely balanced all the way around, and I've proven to myself that it's quite effective with the right bullet on elk. Then I've got friends who swear by the 308 Winchester. You've got pretty much everything the 30-06 can do in a short action. So if you go with the appreciation for a quick, handy, light, balanced, short action cartridge, that sort of pushes those standard length actions out of the picture. And one of the classics that I would lump as a great all around is the 270 Winchester. Been around forever, proven on everything, but it's a long action or a standard length action. I don't mind it, some people do, so much as I hate to throw it out with gonna throw it out. 6.5-284, what are we gonna replace it with? I already mentioned the 708. I think this guy is right here. You can see this pretty similar. What you're getting with the 284 is a little bit fatter in the body, so you get a little more powder into it, a little bit longer before the shoulder bends in. So yeah, you're getting a little more powder, you're getting a little more velocity. Do you need it for woodland whitetails? Absolutely not. Is it handy for open country mule deer? Maybe so. What about elk? Gives you a little more energy as well as a little reach. So then there's the 308, obviously right there beside the 7mm 08. And actually the 708, I hate to say it guys, but it will outperform the 308 at distance. Doesn't amount to much, an inch maybe, but Same powder reservoir driving a more efficient bullet in the 7mm 08. But that doesn't mean the 308 can't do it all, because it can and it has for a long, long time. Another classic short action, kind of falling out of favor now, is the 260 Remington. Boy, I could make a great argument for that being the ultimate deer cartridge. And if anyone has one or is thinking of getting one, more power to you, because that is a classic. Just the right velocity, the right weight bullet, the right balance all the way around. The only problem is it's just not chambered in that many rifles anymore. It's kind of fallen behind because of, you guessed it, 6.5 Creedmoor. And when you look at those two, you're saying, you know, pretty similar powder capacity, same bullet, what's the big deal? And you see it right here in the shoulders and the necks. The reason the 6.5 Creedmoor is so nice for the longer range shooting is because of those long, sleek bullets. And they just perform so well at long range. They retain a lot more energy. And to load those onto a 260, you're going to end up shoving that long bullet down past the junction of the neck and the shoulder into the powder supply. And if you hand load, you can build up what's known as a donut ring on the inside, where the brass sort of builds up right there. And that starts to create some problems. The 6.5 Creedmoor circumvents all of that stuff. Another great all-arounder cartridge, and plenty of people use that one for elk. But I don't think those are necessarily the perfect cartridge. And if it's not going to be the 6.5-284, what's it going to be? Suspense. We're going to keep you hanging for a little bit longer. Some of us would say, why don't we step up to these short fats? They're fitting into the short action too. And what are those? Well, they're, first of all, the 6.8 Western. And I've got to tell you, I'm really liking that one. By next year, that might be my new favorite all-arounder that's pushing not only the 6.5-284 out of the picture, but the new winner that I've got to reveal yet. So the 6.5, or the 6.8 Western, is essentially the good old 270 Winchester in a different outfit with a little more powder capacity. And once again, that pushed back shoulder, the long neck, and those long, long bullets. And this one is chambered in barrels that are 1 1/8-inch twist to maybe 1 7.5-inch twist. That means you're going to be shooting 160, 165, 170, 175 grain boat tail spire point bullets that are going to really reach out there. But there's a little more recoil involved in that. Look at the powder capacity on that little fatty. So another option is the WSMs or the Remington SAUM, the short action ultra magnum from Remington. And as you can see, that one's looking pretty close to the 6.8 Western. But the shoulder's forward a little bit more, you got the shorter neck. Once again, this case was designed before the rage of all these long, sleek, high BC bullets came in. And that's why it suffers just a little bit. But a lot of guys are using this to make wildcats. And we do have one video on our channel about a young man who's working with the 7mm Sherman Max based off of that case. That's a pretty heady little trip right there, but you can't get that in factory rifles or ammunition. Hand loader's proposition, sort of a custom job. So to throw that out, we're going to keep that 6.8 Western close at hand, because I can't argue against anybody who likes that one or wants to shoot it. A little more recoil than you're going to get with this 6.5-284 because of the heavier weight bullets and a little additional powder. So what does that leave us? That leaves us the magical cartridge I haven't revealed yet. That's going to be our new champion. And starting with the bullet, you're going to say, well, that's kind of a long, sleek bullet. And it's standing up just about the same height as the 6.5-284. And the bullet diameter looks about the same. Let's go down to that neck and shoulder. Oop, the shoulder is sitting down a little past it. Yeah, that's looking a lot like the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 6.8 Western, isn't it? It's the 6.5 PRC. This is my pick now for probably the do-it-all best balanced deer / elk cartridge for people who don't like a lot of recoil, don't want a long action, want to minimize the length of the rifle as well as the weight, and get that great performance with those 140 class grain bullets. And this one can really do it. Now, I've got some ballistics I've got to show you guys. I know you love those numbers, and they really tell the tale. But you do need to consider, can you get the rifle? Can you get the ammunition? And that's where some of these just don't make it. Then, unfortunately, the 6.5-284 Norma is one of them. Very few people load for it, and I don't think they're going to increase loading for it in today's market. They're going for these newer cartridges. They're going to do the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 6.5 PRC. The 6.8 Western will probably go on strong. It's catching a lot of buzz now, and I think a lot of folks are going to like that one. So I just really can't recommend the 284 anymore unless you're a hand loader. And the 308 and the 708, they've been around a long time. I can't argue against anybody who wants one of those. Those will definitely do the job. But most folks want something new, something fancy, something snazzy, and you can't argue against that PRC. Now, let's go to the ballistic charts and find out why I think this one's the new winner. What I want to show you first is a chart that I used in that blog article in which I chose the 6.5-284 Norma as my cartridge. Nicely balanced. Look at some of these numbers. I compared it to the 308 Winchester and the 7mm 08 because at the time, those were pretty much the top contenders. And if you look at the bullet weights and the BCs of the bullet, you're going to see some advantages in that 6.5-284 because I picked a really high BC bullet. In fact, it was so high that it was mythological. It was actually an overestimate. They had it ranked at 0.719, and down the road they did some further ballistic testing and figured out it was closer to 0.625 or something. So really that was showing an advantage it does not quite have. Still, it beats out the performance of the 7mm 08 with a 160 grain bullet and a 308 with a 165 grain bullet. And you can look at the muzzle velocities that are starting off pretty closely between the 308 and the 708, but a little bit faster, 150 feet per second with the 6.5-284. And that is legitimate because I have loaded those and gotten those velocities. Chronographed quite a few of them. So you go out to your 200 yards, your 300 yards, your 400 yards, and get your impacts. The first number is the drop of the bullet. So at 200 yards, they're all still high a little bit. At 300 yards, you get the drops. You're at 5.6 on the 308, 5.2 on the 708. Told you it shot a little flatter. And only 3 inches of drop out of that 6.5. But that's not a huge number, but starting to be appreciated at 300 yards. And at 400 yards, it opens up. You're at 20.6 with the 308, 19.5 with the 708, 14 with the 6.5-284. And for most of us, that's about the end of the ball game. I don't like shooting past 400 yards if I don't have to. You can go out to your 500 and 600 yard charts and just compare those numbers. But remember, you're getting a little bit of a skewed number off of that high BC on the 6.5-284 bullet. That was the benchmark several years ago when I wrote that blog. Now I've got numbers for today that are more accurate. We're reflecting accurate BCs and kind of the latest velocities that you're getting out of the latest hand loading manuals. These are not necessarily top-end velocities. You always need to remember that different rifles shoot the same cartridges to different speeds. On factory ammunition, and different hand loaders achieve different velocities, et cetera, but these are pretty good average right in here. Toward the top end, which most of us kind of like to get or strive for anyway, but I'm comparing a 270 Winchester, 6.5-284, and a 6.5 PRC. Obviously, I'm not going to bother the numbers on the 260 Ram or the 6.5 Creedmoor, any of those slower ones, because obviously they're not going to perform as well as the 6.5 PRC. It's faster. If you want one that outperforms it, you can go to the 6.5 300 Weatherby Magnum. That'll definitely do it. All right, so what we're doing is we're shooting at a 6-inch target, so that means I'm going to zero so that I don't go any higher than 3 inches in any of my trajectory, and that usually happens around 150 yards. We are going to pretend that we're shooting all of these in an 8-pound rifle to get an idea of the recoil, how equal it is. And then we're going to have figured out the maximum point blank range. It's the maximum reach before you drop 3 inches below your line of sight. And let's just go to that number right away because it really tells us a lot. Mostly they're pretty darn close. You look at the MPR on the 270, 292 yards, 6.5-284, 288 yards, 270 wins. But go to the 6.5 PRC and you're out to 299 yards. So that means essentially that when you zero this way, you can hold dead on your target right in the center of its chest and hit it out to 300 yards. It's quick. So drops and deflections. Get out to 300 yards. The 270 is dropping 3.5 inches. The 284 Norma is dropping 3.6 inches. No difference really there. And 3.7 for the PRC. So they're all pretty darn close on that one. The energies, though, are probably going to start to tell the tale. 1988 for the 270. Well, that's a 150 grain bullet. 1862 for the 284 Norma, and 2019 for the PRC. It's already hitting harder than the 270, even though the bullet is lighter. That's because of the higher ballistic coefficient. So let's look under each of the cartridges for the BC number. BC 0.591 on the 270, 0.625 on the 284, and 625 on the PRC. Same bullet for both of those, 143 grain. Wow, there's where you start to get those advantages in those long, sleek bullets. That's why I'm having to give this new award to the 6.5 PRC instead of the old 270 or any of the other old ones. Go out to 400 yards and it really starts to add up. You know, your drops aren't all that much different. You have a 2-inch advantage with the PRC. And the wind deflection, you've got a 1-inch advantage with it. It's the energies, once again, where it really shines. It's the PRC is still hanging on to 1,805 foot-pounds of energy compared to 1,764 for the 270. That is well above the recommended minimum for elk, which is usually cited at 1,500. In fact, at 500 yards, the 270 hangs on to just over 1,500 at 1,559. The 284 falls under at 1,478, and the PRC is the highest at 1,610. Now, do these really matter? Is an elk going to notice the difference? No, he's not going to notice the difference. This isn't about potential of each of these cartridges. This is just about being nitpicky and studying all this ballistic stuff and saying, look, if we're going to buy a cartridge that we think is going to be the best all around, and we consider all these things, one's going to obviously win by a hair. Does it matter? Not that much. But if you're buying a brand new rifle and you're planning to use it for all of your hunting, and within reasonable sized animals, of course, and I would include moose in this too, because in my experience, moose are not that hard to put down with a good bullet in the right place. I've done it with bullets as light as 120 grains out of a 6.5-6, so 140 grain out of this PRC ought to more than do the job. Just make sure it's the right bullet, tough enough. So there's how you make your decisions though. Can I find a rifle chambered for it for a good price? Can I find ammunition? Can I find factory ammunition in a variety of formats and different bullets? Can I hand load for it and get a lot of different formats and bullets? Are they making the ammunition, or is it something they're just really not making anymore? Gosh, you got to consider that. And then it's the weight and the length of the rifle, short action versus long action, all the rest of it. Think about all those things when you're putting your little project together, and then you'll decide whether you want a 6.8 Western, a 6.5 PRC, or sticking with some of the old guys like the 308 Winchester. The deer won't care, the elk won't care, I won't care. Your buddies might give you a raft of stuff, but then that's part of the game, guys. That's part of the fun. My dog's better than your dog. It's just what we do. But the important thing is that we try to do our best. We select the tools that we think are going to make us better hunters, more effective shots, because that's what we want to do. Is we want to hunt like the best hunters can hunt. We want to kill our animals efficiently, quickly, humanely, and all those usual arguments. That's not just fluff and stuff. That's the real deal. We care about the resource. We care about our behavior in the field. So we deserve to be picky about the tools that we choose and use. That's my take on the 6.5 PRC. You guys might want to consider it. You might want to blow it away and get something else. Just choose wisely, choose something that works for you, and do concentrate on being the best hunter of field you can possibly be. Hey, this is Ron Spomer. I want to thank you for watching. Until next time, hunt honest and shoot straight.